Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Dr. Regina Bradley, and this is Outkasted Conversations number 37. Yeah, so I'm excited about this one. We talked a little bit about the gospel of Outkast. We talked about a little bit about everything else. But today we actually have somebody who actually does religious and Christianity studies, Candice Benbow. How you?
Thank you. How are you? I gotta tell my mama I made it because
That's right.
I'm on podcast the conversation. I made it. I made it.
Well, we're excited to have you and all that other good stuff. But you know what you got to do to get into the club. How did you become Outkasted?
So I would love to say that I was down with OutKast since day one, but Southern Playlistic Cadillac Music came out when I was like 13, right? So I'm in middle school at that point, being a junior usher. So I didn't really get exposed really to OutKast in the way that I believed I should until I was a freshman at Tennessee State University. And the bulk of my friends from TSU are from Atlanta, and it didn't hurt that I was dating a dude who's from Zone 4. So that was my introduction into OutKast, and ATLNs, all of that had been released like 2-3 years before I started undergrad. I started undergrad in 2000, and they were bumping it every single day. So being at TSU, I had no choice but to learn about them and fall in love. And then Stankonia just comes out and just changes my whole entire life. So I became outcasted much later than most folk.
Yeah, I mean, I remember going to the record store. You remember those record stores?
I worked at a record store, Peach's record store, for 2 weeks. And then when they gave me my check, they told me I ain't work out. So I worked at Peach's for 2 weeks in high school.
Yeah, so I remember going to the record store, and I was like trying to battle between getting Stankonia and something else. I don't know if it was like True Hill or something. I was like, I needed to decide. I would literally just stand there for like 20 minutes at the display, like, I don't know what to do. Yeah, but it's dope because you are in your final year at Duke School of Divinity School. How y'all say
it? Divinity School. We say it. Yeah, that's how we do it.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm really curious to hear your thoughts about how we can connect, ideas of spirituality, especially with you being from the South. I think you're from North Carolina, right? I did my homework.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially being part of this later generation of Southern Black folks who are trying to still work out what it means to be spiritual in the post-civil rights era, right? Yeah. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about, what are some of the ways that OutKast kind of challenges or complicates ideas of spirituality from, previous ideas, what we see about spirituality in hip-hop, like the 5% Nation, for example.
Right. So what is really interesting and has been interesting for me getting introduced to OutKast in college is that I don't separate OutKast from me as a budding young woman and as a young woman who was also asking questions about faith in college, right? Yeah. So OutKast was beautiful in the respect that it married the sound. It had the sound that I remembered from church. Like,
right.
Several tracks, you hear the organs. You can hear a sample of a choir on a track where they're talking about where is, like, church, for instance, the song church, or asking, like, where is God in the midst of this continued oppression that not only is happening in the South, but happening to Black people globally. So you're able to hear this almost call and response to in a lot of their music that is rooted in Black church, rooted in Southern Black church, right? That is different from what you hear in hip hop from different regions of the country. Like, you can't even, like, I would even go as far as to say that you really can't separate Black church sound from OutKast. Yeah. And what makes that beautiful is that it's familiar, but they also represent this generation that's coming up saying we can't do church the same way that we've been doing church, right? This generation that, like, you know, they're the ones who we were junior ushers, and then when we get the chance to say we don't want to go to church, we don't go to church because we saw the bull in it, right? So that that sound and that critique is young Black South in a way that it's not young Black North. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's not genuine to or organic to hip hop in the West Coast. It's that you've been reared in a tradition, especially coming out of Atlanta. The civil rights movement, Black church in Atlanta is its own entity. So, like, you've been reared in a tradition that is inherent in your sound, and now you are part of this movement that begins to, like, stretch and critique it.
Yeah, because, you know, it's interesting that we're having this conversation now, considering the protests that are taking place about Ferguson and in New York and all that good stuff, and you're seeing, you know, connections between hip hop and protest in ways that we haven't seen in a while. Especially, you know, folks are talking about J. Cole, who's from North Carolina. You know what I'm saying? So there's still that inherent discussion about how Southern hip hop retains this idea of a protest rhetoric in the hip hop age. But it also, you know, when you're talking about the bi-coastal differences between, you know, OutKast sound and the idea that you can't separate the Black church from hip hop, right, especially in the South, it makes me think about the ways in which OutKast uses spirituality to actually push back against organized religion, right? It's almost like when you think about this idea of the Black church in the South after the Civil Rights Movement, it starts to collapse a little bit because, you know, when we think about during the Civil Rights Movement, there was this kind of monolithic, inherent Black church, Black, often Baptist church, right?
Right.
And OutKast is aware of what that looks like, but at the same time, it's like they're pushing back against what these tropes of the Southern Black church look like. What are some of your thoughts on the ways that they use the trope of the Black church to actually question organized religion?
I mean, one, it's necessary for them to do so, right? Because they are the exact, in many ways, like I was thinking about this earlier, in many ways, OutKast, like, lets the church down, right? So because they have the church's sound, like, it is very clear that they have been steeped and rooted in Black church culture and tradition, and yet they refuse to embody it as an institution and embody the very, like, oppressive mannerisms and engagements that come out of the Black church. So in that respect, it's kind of like, you know, I taught you all you know, or I've taught you so much, and then you walk away from it in a way that when you listen to their music, I'm going back to their use of just call and response, use of Black church musicality, to even in songs critique or speak to, like, this higher level of understanding of God that you don't have to get through just the church, or the fact that you're not even getting it from the church at all, right? Like, so even for me, like, parts of Stankonia and even parts of Speaker Box were for me church.
Yeah.
Right? Like when we're talking about, even as you were saying, like, protest music or protest songs in Ferguson, I was just having a conversation this week about them being hymns in a very and seeing them as our new hymns. Like, I tell people all the time, I love the way you move. For me, is like, it is a hymn. Like like the fact that, like, being able to see, like, Keytoy and me having a booty, and, like, not ever being told that because I went to church, you're supposed to wear girdles and slips and all this other stuff, and she gets to, like, shake it, and it's, like, cool, and and it's sexy, and there's something like that. It was this way that like I can like me and the fullness of me, and I don't have to necessarily be attached to the church, because that's the problem, because the church doesn't allow you to do it, but I can still have elements of my faith be reminded, or elements of my upbringing through the church that connected me to God be very present in a space that I don't see that in church. And OutKast has done that in ways that I don't think many other artists have done or could do.
Right, right. Well, when you were talking about actually being able to recognize your full self, I think about the skit from The Love Below where Andre is talking to God, and he's like, "Oh, you're a girl," right? Like it's kind of like this kind of instant, oh, revelation, right? And I think that's significant. Coming from the Southern context, right? Is this idea that the South is there's questions about if the South is patriarchal. Some folks will say it's still patriarchal, right? Especially when you think about the church. I'm a Methodist, I'm CME, so I remember there was a big to-do when there was a woman pastor who came to our church. They didn't quite know what to do with her. I thought she was dope. I was like, this is great. But there's a question about where women fit into this idea of the prophetic tradition, right? And I really like the fact, this is stuff you don't pick up on until much later, because when I first heard it, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, but it was really, we're talking about this idea of resistance. That was quite a resistant moment, is this idea that God is a woman, and what that means in terms of how we interpret, the connections between spirituality and self-identity. What are some of your thoughts on the connections between gender and religion and how we understand OutKast work?
Well, one of the things that I think is amazing about OutKast in and of itself is just the group dynamic, and the fact that Andre 3000, and I'm going to talk about him for a little bit, but like Andre is this eccentric force that is able to say stuff that dude from the hood will listen to, and begin to think about in ways that some other folk would not be able to. Mm-hmm. And so this kind of like subversive play that even Andre, and to some extent also in earlier albums, Big Boy does, signals like this new move for dudes in hip hop that listen to hip hop to begin to think about issues of gender, even the treatment of women in some ways that they had maybe not thought about them before. Like, I was just talking to a friend of mine about Miss Jackson and or Rosa Parks, and so and this idea that like you can have artists like OutKast creating these songs that affirm women. Right, and that and not only just affirm women, but hold themselves accountable in the ways in which they have disrespected women, right? So to hold themselves accountable and say like, I didn't do what I needed to do in this relationship, or I didn't do what I needed to do to affirm you as a woman, and whereas and so you have elements in there, inherent Southern respectability politics that like men are supposed to respect women, ma'am, yes ma'am, sir, no sir. So you have that on a hip hop, the hip hop extension and manifestation of that. But then you also have like this real and legit moment that is like, we need women, we need to treat them better, like we love them, like that you don't see in a time where like where Nelly was like swiping a credit card through our butt cheeks, and you know what I'm saying? So you have the overwhelming elements of misogyny that are in hip hop, but then you also have like this moment where one of the biggest groups in the world, one of the most influential groups of hip hop, makes songs that inherently affirm what the rest of the culture is not.
Mm. Yeah, no doubt. I hate to break up this conversation. We just get into the good stuff, but how can people get in touch with you? What you working on? All that other good stuff.
So I am on Twitter at Candice Benbow. I just came back from AAR where I presented on twerking as a way in which Black women can free themselves from theological oppression. And so I'm really interested. I'm really interested in the ways in which Black young Black women, who I like to call church girls, I'm really interested in the ways in which we can learn how from transgressive women, women that we are taught have sinned, how we can negotiate power and attain freedom. So part of that too is I'm actually going to Atlanta, coming to Atlanta fairly soon to talk to some women in Magic City about the ways in which they have seen they have been empowered in the ways in which like hip hop music is broken, hits are made out of the strip club, and so how they have felt about having and wielding that type of power. What can that say to a church girl who will never interact with somebody out of Magic City, so we think, or what does that tell them about the ways in which they need to inhabit and own themselves in a way that we're not taught how to do that in the church? So I'm doing probably what would scare half of my Sunday school teachers, but I think it's very necessary at the same time.
Well, yeah, no, I think that's great. Being able to kind of complicate and blur these ideas of secular and sacred and what sacred means now as compared to, I guess a more traditional context. But Reverend Benbow, thank you so much for joining us for this episode, and we appreciate all the insight that you gave us on how to think about spirituality and OutKast work.
Thank you for having me. I feel like I done made it. So whoever got sick that you had to call me, I don't wish sickness on anybody, but I just thank the Lord that I am in well and in the land of the living, that I can be on Outkasted Conversations.
Well, shoot, I need to put that on the website. Glowing. No, I appreciate it. I'm Dr. Regina Bradley. This is Outkasted Conversations. We'll holler at y'all next week. Y'all be easy.